certainly grateful that her health has allowed her to come back and be back with us. Continue to remember Paul Beverly Stackpole in your prayers. As well as mentioned this morning, Kathy Downer is off the ventilator and out of ICU, and she'll hopefully go to rehab soon. So we're certainly grateful for that. We want to continue to remember her, as it's a longer road to recovery after her gallbladder burst a couple weeks ago. So we certainly want to continue to remember her as she recovers. Remember those on our shut-in list: Nancy Mike, Elaine Fletcher, remember Lane Castor, and Ruth Hoover. Again, we could use more volunteers to help launch the security camera, to help control the PowerPoint songs from the back, from the computer, or clicker while sitting there near the computer, and helping adjust the audio, the microphones to whoever's speaking or whoever's singing, adjusting it to each one. So, if you want to volunteer for that, let us know, and we will have somebody show you. Our order of services this evening, Brother Sean Redhuffin is going to lead us in our song service. Our opening prayer will be by Brother Melvin Dalrymple. Our closing prayer by Brother Paul Masters. Brother Mike Smith is going to have the scripture reading, James 4:13 through 17. Brother A.J. Kaufman will have the Lord's Supper. Turn it over to Sean Ray this time.
Our opening song will be number 209. Number 209. Christ for the world we sing, the world to Christ we bring, with loving zeal, the poor and well and mourn, the faint and broken born, send and sorrow worn, whom Christ doth heal. Christ for the world we sing, the world to Christ we bring, with one prayer. The wayward and the lost are Christless passions lost, redeemed and countless lost from darkness there. Christ for the world we sing, the world to Christ we bring, with one accord, with gospel work to share, with costly groans to bear, with gospel cross to bear, for Christ our Lord. If you're following along in your song books, you can mark your invitation song at number 332. Number 332. Ask if you're able to please stand. class will be number 224. Number 224.
Reading this evening is taken from James 4th chapter, verses 13 through 17. Come now, ye who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make profit. Yet ye do not know what your life will be like tomorrow, for you are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead you ought to say, the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So for one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, for him it is sin.
Certainly great presence of everyone here this evening, and I encourage you to be taking out your Bibles and following along with me as you study through God's Word. That's what I have to say this evening to do the truth, and that we define and make practical application of our everyday walks of life, that we can be better servants of God in the future than we have in the past. There are some topics that we are somewhat familiar with, but perhaps are topics that we don't always like to discuss. Perhaps topics that we do not enjoy discussing. And one of those topics that is one that we probably steer clear of, but is a topic we're all familiar with, is the topic of death. It can be to some a scary thought, the fact of dying. For those who are faithful Christians, it can be a time of great comfort. that we hear an awful lot about, and yet, to some extent, we hear very little of at the same time. We are aware of death and how common it is and how it can come at any time, and yet we always need to be reminded of that from time to time about its certainty and its unexpectedness at the same time. So for a few moments tonight, I ask you to take out your Bibles with me as we explore the topic of death. Let's begin by understanding that death, it is certain. There's a famous saying, you've all heard it, I'm sure, many times before. There are two things certain in life: death and taxes. Now, that's said mostly to relate to the fact of taxes and lament the fact that we have to pay them. But there is truth to the first statement. The first half of that statement, the certainty of death, fits with exactly what the Bible talks about. Go to Joshua 23. In Joshua 23, in Joshua's farewell address, he addresses and tells the Israelites that he is about to go the way of all the earth. Look at verse 14 of Joshua 23. And now I am about to go the way of all the earth. And you know in your hearts and souls, all of you, that not one word is found of all the good things the Lord your God promised concerning you. All have come to pass for you. Not one of them has failed. As Joshua stands here in Joshua 23 and is addressing Israel shortly before his life would end, he refers to death as going the way of all the earth. David in 1 Kings chapter 2 and in verse 2 said the same thing to Solomon. I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong and show yourself a man. In a passage that is familiar to us, Hebrews 9:27, the passage is really dealing with the fact that Christ died once for sins as we did, but it states the fact that it is appointed for man to die once. And after that comes judgment. That's why we talk about Enoch and Elijah and we think about the fact that they were not, but God took them. That is peculiar. That's something that stands out in our mind, and the reason it stands out is because, unlike everybody else, they did not die. You go to Genesis 5 or Genesis 11 in the genealogies of the New Testament, meaning they all end the same way. And he died. Death is certain. Unless the Lord returns before we die, we all one day will pass through this life. One day, our soul and body will be separated in death. Death is a certainty. But not only is death a certainty, it's important we understand that its day is unknown. Its day is unknown. None of us know when our time will end. None of us know when our life is going to end. In the passage that Mike read for us a moment ago in James chapter 4 and beginning at verse 13, it says, Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. In Proverbs 27:1 it says, Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring. Sure, we all like to think that we're going to live very long lives. That's not always the case. There are those who live very long lives, and there are those whose lives are cut short. Whether because of health issues, whether because of accidents, whatever it is, there are those whose life is cut short, and though they may have thought they had another day on this earth, they did not. We sometimes think about the future. And listen, there's nothing wrong with thinking about the future. There's nothing wrong with planning ahead as long as we keep God in our plans. As long as we understand that that day may not come. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. The problem in James chapter 4 and verse 13 and 14 was not that they made plans to go to a new city. It was not that they made plans to buy and sell. It was not that they made plans to make a profit. The problem was they treated it as a certainty. And yet, James says, your life is a mist. Some translations say a vapor. We're going outside when it's cold. And as you breathe, you can see your breath before you. There before your face. And then just like that, it's gone. And that's the comparison that James used in James 4 to our life. It's a mist that's there, and then just like that, it's gone. Remember the rich fool? Jesus was, as the questions were coming about the inheritance, Jesus talked about the rich fool who said that, I've got all these possessions, and so and this great crop, so I'm going to tear down my barns, I'm going to build bigger ones. Listen, just like James 4, there was nothing wrong with buying and selling and making a profit. There was nothing wrong with his plans to make bigger barns so we had more storage. His problem was he forgot God in his plans. If you go through that text, the problem was his thought was, I will do this and I will do that, as if he was guaranteed another day. Instead of having the mindset that as long as the Lord wills, this is the plans that I have. Instead, he forgot God. And in the story that night, his life was required of him. Death is not only certain, but its day is unknown. We know it's coming. It's appointed a man wants to die. We just don't know when. Let me say this as well. Not only do we not know when we will die, we don't know when Christ will return. Again, it's one of those things that perhaps in our mind at times we think about it as many years away. And yet in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 36, Jesus said, of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, my Father only. He said it would be as the days of Noah. They were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage, and then the flood came. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. That is, when it returns, it will be sudden, and everything else will continue on just as it always has. Our life could end because we die, or life or this earth could end. Christ could return. And the day of both of those is unknown. But not only is death certain, and not only is death's day unknown, death is the end of our opportunity to turn to God. I want you to go to Luke 16 with me for just a moment. Luke chapter 16. Luke 16, beginning at verse 19. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The poor man died and was carried to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried, and in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off, and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things, but now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. Besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm has been fixed, in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, and none may cross from there to us. And he said, Then I beg you, Father, to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they also come to this place of torment. But Abraham said, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. He said to him, If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. Here in Luke chapter 16, as Jesus is telling what I believe is not a parable, but a real story of the rich man and Lazarus, he's relaying the fact that here are two individuals, a rich man who fared sumptuously, who had great riches, who was clothed in purple, and in that day, being clothed in purple was a sign of wealth. And here's this man who clearly is well-to-do, and he has everything he wants here and now. On the other hand, here's a poor man. A man covered in sores. A man lying at the rich man's gate. A man who just wants the crumbs that fall from the rich man's table. A man who has dogs that come and lick sores. I'm going to stop for a second and ask you this question. At this point in the story, which one would you want to be? I think if we're looking at the first half of the story, we'd all say, well, you know what? I think I'd be the rich man. But at the end, as the story goes on, it happened to them, as happens to all, they died. That's certainty. And as they died, they were buried, and then they were carried away to await final judgment. The rich man is in torment. The poor man is in Abraham's bosom. That is what Christ would refer to on the cross as paradise. The rich man lifts his eyes and he is in torment. The rich man wishes that Lazarus could just dip his finger in the water to touch the end of his tongue that he might cool it. For I am in anguish in this flame. And Abraham points out to him that there is a great chasm fixed. That rich man cannot cross over to Abraham and to Lazarus, nor can Lazarus cross over to the rich man. What that signifies is the finality of where they will end up. By the way, as terrible as this place sounds in Luke 16, this isn't hell. This is the Hadean realm. This is not even the final punishment. And then, one day, all will stand before the judgment seat and give an account for how they've lived. And those who have done evil will be cast into eternal fire, a fire that never ends. But you see, once we die, like that rich man, there's no changing our fate. There's no going back in timing to change. If we could go back and decide, then hell would have nobody. Because everyone would make up their mind to change once they see how terrible it is. We cannot decide after death to turn to God. We cannot decide when it's too late. We cannot go back and relive our life. We give an account for the deeds, 2 Corinthians 5:10, done in the body. After death, the body and soul are separate. Our fate is sealed. That is why we must change now. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. And death seals our fate. And Christ's return seals our fate. That's why the Hebrew writer would tell them to exhort one another today. First of all, so don't get hardened with the deceitfulness of sin. Because you don't need to wait until tomorrow before recording decisions. There are some things that can wait. But because the date of death is uncertain, there are other things that cannot wait. Because death seals our fate. It's the end of our opportunity to turn to God. Let me say, death can't be the time of sorrow. Death often is the time of sorrow. We sorrow when we lose a loved one. You lose a friend. You lose a family member. And you go and you stand there at their funeral, and there are tears that are shed. There is sorrow for that relationship that we can no longer have with them. We can no longer see them face to face. We can no longer enjoy the time together that we once did. And there is sorrow in death. What's even sadder is to stand over the grave of someone that we realize is mercifully right. But it's another thing to stand at the grave of one who, when we look at their life, we realize they haven't lived as God intended it to be. There's even more sorrow in those times. Because not only will we not have that relationship with them, but because they are not having a relationship with God, they will be separated from Him and suffer from eternal punishment. And so that can cause even more, often does cause, should cause, even more sorrow as we stand over the tomb of one who is unfaithful. Let me say, that should cause us to consider, too, the faith. Because unlike the saying, misery loves company, it's clear that misery does not love company when it comes to punishment in the Hadean realm or in hell, as the rich man indicates to us in Luke chapter 16. So death is a time of sorrow and sadness for me. But death can be deliverance. Death can be deliverance. Death should be deliverance. This almost sounds crazy. If you think about it just sheerly from the human standpoint, thinking of death as deliverance seems crazy. But that's not what the Bible would point out. The Bible points out in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 13 that we do not sorrow as those who have no hope. But we do not want you to be uninformed, 1 Thessalonians 4:13, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope. See, the question is being raised here in 1 Thessalonians about the return of Christ. And if Christ is coming back, but He hasn't yet, then what's going to happen to those who already died? What's going to happen to those who have already fallen asleep? It seems to me that some of them seem to have this idea that maybe they're not going to be rewarded. And so Paul's reminding them here in 1 Thessalonians that they will be. We'll come back to this text here in a moment when we close. But Paul's reminding them here in 1 Thessalonians 4 of the fact that Christ is going to return, and when it comes to the grieving, we do not sorrow as those who have no hope. You see, when you stand at the grave of someone, particularly, we said there's times of sorrow, but when you stand at the grave of someone, and when you look at how they lived, and you say, as far as I can tell, they've lived a life of faithful service to God, and they'll be in heaven. Then when you look at that, it causes some comfort. Yes, we sorrow. But we're sorrowing only because of the relationship we've lost now. There's something far greater that can be gained forever. And that's the home in heaven of God. And so Paul's reminding them here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 that yes, we're sorrowing, but we don't sorrow like everybody else. Because we have hope. We have the hope of the resurrection from the dead that he talked about in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. We have the hope of being with God forever. There's comfort in that. You see, what we need to understand is that the loss of life may be sadness for the relationship lost, but when it's a Christian that's died, they are blessed. Look at Revelation 14, that should be. Revelation 14 and in verse 13. And I hear a voice from heaven saying, write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their bodies, for their deeds follow them. You see, what John is writing in Revelation 14:13 is that when there's somebody who has been a faithful servant of God who dies, and there may be sorrow for that relationship lost, but they're blessed because they have rest from their labors, and their deeds have followed them. They can and will be rewarded if they serve God faithfully. And John says that's blessed. That's why Peter could lie there, chained between the bars in Acts chapter 12, when he thinks that his life is going to be taken from him the next day, and sleep. Sleep so heavily that the angel has to wake him up. That's why Paul could write in Philippians See, when one is a Christian and they die, they are blessed. That death, but when it may seal their faith, they serve God faithfully. They know that that faith that is sealed is a home in heaven with God. And what Paul says is that is deliverance. 2 Timothy chapter 4. 2 Timothy chapter 4, beginning at verse 16. 2 Timothy chapter 4, beginning at verse 16. At my first offense, no one came to stand by me, but all deserted me. May it not be charged against them. But the Lord stood by me and strengthened me, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed, and all the Gentiles might hear it. So I was rescued or delivered from the lion's mouth. Verse 18, the Lord will rescue or deliver me. I want you to pause right there for a second. We're going to come back to verse 18. I want you to jump back to verse 6 with me for a moment. 2 Timothy 4:6. For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. I said earlier, death date is uncertain. Paul knew it was coming. Paul knew his was coming. That he was giving his life because of his service to God. Paul says, I am being poured out as a drink offering. The time of my departure has come. Then you come to verse 18, and he says, but the Lord's going to rescue me. And as you read that at first, you may look at it and say, well, hang on. He rescued you the first time. Well, let's get the timeline here. When we're studying Acts, that first time, that was the imprisonment that ended in Acts. When we close in the book of Acts, Paul was imprisoned in Rome. He's in prison for some time. He's released about 2 years later. He's been free for a little bit. He's back in prison again here. This is around 65 to 67. And this time, he's going to give his life. And yet he uses the same terminology to refer to being let go the first time. He says, the Lord's going to rescue you. Pick back up to verse 18 now. The Lord will rescue me from every evil deed and bring me safely into his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Now what Paul's saying here is, the Lord will deliver me, not from death, but through death. Because of verse 7, where he could say, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. He could say in verse 8 that the crown of righteousness was laid up for him. He could say in verse 18 that he would be brought safely into the heavenly kingdom. Not by being delivered from death, but through it. Because now he has rest. Now he doesn't have to worry about the wicked world around him. Now he doesn't have to worry about the pains and the sicknesses of life. But instead, he would be in paradise awaiting the final judgment. Death may be a time of sorrow for many, but for a Christian, death is a time of deliverance. I want you to go to 1 Thessalonians 4. 1 Thessalonians 4. As we come to a close this evening, look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. First, I want to ask you a question. I want to make a statement and then ask you a question off of it. Death, that's what we've been considering. It is coming, and we do not know when. Here's the question. Are you ready for it? Look at 1 Thessalonians 4. But we do not want you, verse 13, to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others who do not have hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. For this we declare to you by a word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God. And the then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. Paul said we don't need to sorrow as those who have no hope. We have encouragement and we have comfort in the face of death. And those who have fallen asleep, they may not be here anymore. They serve God faithfully, they're going to be with Him. What we need to do is encourage one another with these words and understanding the fact that we have that hope in heaven. We can be called to meet Him in the air, and we can always be with the Lord. Say it again, death. It is coming, and we cannot go with it. Are you ready for it? Are you ready for when death comes? Maybe today, tomorrow, it can be many years from now. We cannot know. But I know this. It is certain. If Christ does not come back first, one day we will all depart this life. Are you ready? Are you ready for it? And that was to happen to you. Are you ready if Christ is to return? If you're here and you've heard the word of God and believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, but you've not yet obeyed the gospel, you've not repented your sins, confess your faith in Him, be buried in the waters of baptism, rising and walking in the newness of life, surrendering all to Him, knowing that if your life is to end, you can be called to meet the Lord in the air and be with Him forever. Maybe you're here and you've done that, but somewhere along the line you say, I'm not as faithful as me. Your life too could end at any point. So why not, if you have a sin of compliant nature, take it to God right now? And I mean right now, not wait until the invitation, right now to Him in prayer. And take care of that. We're not guaranteed another minute.